Confessions from within the military reignite the debate over allegations of war crimes in Gaza. How solid is the evidence, and will it prompt war crimes charges? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Sami Zaidan. A group of former Israeli soldiers say they have new evidence of potential war crimes committed by the Israeli army during the war on Gaza. Well, Breaking the Silence hasn't released its report yet, but it's believed to contain allegations of indiscriminate killings and attacks. The claims come less than a week after the UN Special Investigator, Richard Falk, said the assault on Gaza appeared to be a war crime. Well, these reports are not the first to surface. Also last week, the Israeli press published a range of damning eyewitness testimony from soldiers and commanders of their own side's actions. Shireen Tadros now.
It was a war, said Israel, to dismantle Hamas's infrastructure. It was not a war against the people of Gaza. This was a line repeated by Prime Minister Olmert when he announced a unilateral ceasefire. By then, nearly 1,400 Palestinians had been killed. But now a different picture is emerging. An Israeli newspaper has published accounts of soldiers involved in the operation. They say killing Palestinian civilians and destroying their homes was allowed in Israel's rules of engagement during the war. An infantry leader describes how a Palestinian mother and her 2 children were killed. He said the platoon commander let the family go and told them to go to the right. One mother and her 2 children didn't understand and they went to the left, but they forgot to tell the sharpshooter on the roof. He went on to say, the sharpshooter saw a woman and children approaching him, closer than the lines he was told no one should pass. He shot them straight away. He killed them. Not simply a case of negligence, but a wider systematic policy by the military, according to those investigating soldiers' behaviour.
We're not talking here about just another very aggressive mission. We're talking about here about just a different category of aggression, which hasn't been around at all during the Second Intifada, even in the most aggressive parts of it.
In a very similar story, Al Jazeera's Gaza correspondent Ayman Mohideen, who was inside Gaza during the war, investigated claims that civilians waving white flags were also killed.
She distributed white flags and led them out. She walked at the front carrying a white flag, followed by other women carrying their children.
When we reached the top of the road, the special forces that were positioned in a house right opposite to us, they took us by surprise.
But despite the presence of children and the display of white flags, the military opened fire.
Another part of the testimony revealed a squad leader was shocked by the conduct of Israeli forces. To write death to the Arabs on the walls, to take family pictures and spit on them just because you can. To understand how much the IDF has fallen in the realm of ethics, really, it's what I'll remember the most. As one of Al Jazeera's correspondents there during the war, I witnessed firsthand this type of vandalism. And in the case of this house, they left them notes on the walls. So here you can see it says Hamas bad, Israeli Defense Force good. And just below it, it says IDF or Israeli Defense Force, we're here. While many insist an independent investigation is what's needed, for now, the Israeli army say they'll look into the soldiers' testimonies themselves.
We have decided to open an investigation, a thorough investigation, to check these matters. It's important for me to say that the IDF policy is to save lives on both sides of the border.
It's been 2 months since the war on Gaza ended. The physical and emotional destruction of a people and a territory still evident on every corner. The soldiers' testimonies may back up the stories we were hearing throughout the war, but the question is whether they'll bring the people of Gaza any closer to the justice that has so far evaded them. Shireen Tadros, Al Jazeera, Jerusalem.
Well, joining us today are our guests in Tel Aviv, Major General Yaakov Amidror, former commander of the Israeli Army's National Defense College and former head of the Army's Research and Assessment Division. Also in Tel Aviv, Michael Swath, a legal counselor for Israel's Yesh Din Human Rights Group and also an international human rights and criminal law expert. And in London, Jeremy Corbyn, Labour Member of Parliament for Islington North and a human rights activist. Thank you all for joining us. If I could start with Mr. Swath. You've seen some of this testimony and the evidence. How strong is it that war crimes were indeed committed?
Well, the new testimonies are definitely shocking, and I think they raise a very heavy burden on the IDF to prove that war crimes have not been committed. I think if the content of those testimonies are correct, then there can be little doubt that severe, blatant violations of international humanitarian law has been carried out during the war in Gaza. The question of war crimes must be investigated because it bears personal individual responsibility, and without a proper professional, unbiased and independent investigation, it is difficult to say what exactly has happened there.
All right, let's take the question to Mr. Amidror. You're also involved in the investigation which the Israeli army is launching into the events in Gaza. Are you seeing the same picture, the same sort of strong evidence that Mr. Swath was referring to there?
No, first of all, I want to make the audience understand. They make the audience understand that statistically it is 3 after the opening, which was so anti-Israeli. Now there are 3 anti-Israelis people and only myself. So give me the time to tell you what I think.
I'm not sure all of our guests would be happy to be characterized as anti-Israeli.
I'm sorry. No. I'm sorry, Mr. Amidror. I'm not an anti-Israeli. No. Mr. Amidror, you will not continue before me saying that I'm not an anti-Israeli. I am an Israeli. I'm not less a patriot than you are. And this allegation is rubbish. That's it. Okay. Now you can continue.
Thank you. Mr. Amidror, if we could perhaps steer away from personal assessments of the participants in the show and your point about the evidence and the investigation that you're making, perhaps.
A little bit, sir, a little bit politeness. A little bit politeness. First, there is no any evidence. All what was published are rumors. No one said I saw. No one said I took part in. People said, I heard from a friend that something happened. Up till now, the investigation didn't find any one soldier who said, I saw it or I took part in it. So, first of all, there are no allegations, but rumors. Second, investigation in Israel, unlike many other countries in the Middle East, as you can see from what happened to the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, are very, very strict, real, and no one will stop the investigation till it will find the truth. I don't know what is the truth. Up till now, only rumors around. But if will be an investigation, and there is an investigation done by the Attorney General of the military forces, it will not be stopped till we find the truth. I don't believe to the allegations of Al Jazeera, to allegations of the Palestinians, and even the other Israeli who called himself patriot. There are no any evidence to actions against the law, and I'm not talking about violence inside buildings and so on for force. I am speaking about killing innocent civilians who are not connected to the war. Unlike an investigation which hadn't been taken part in Gaza after the Hamas people killed members of Fatah families, here someone is going to make in the Israeli military forces a real investigation. And don't worry, in Israel, unlike many other places, an investigation is a real one.
If I could move on, you've had almost double the time of our first guest so far. I want to bring it back to Mr. Swath. How do you explain that discrepancy that we hear from human rights groups who say we've seen evidence and official investigations that say we're only hearing rumors? We haven't come across anyone who's actually seen a violation.
Well, that's because the Israeli Defense Forces do not treat Palestinian accounts or foreign accounts as evidence. The new released testimonies are shocking, but they're not surprising. The important thing about them is that they come from IDF soldiers and not from Palestinians. Israeli human rights organizations and international human rights organizations, definitely Palestinian human rights organizations, have been gathering evidence for the last 2 months and have plenty of evidence for violations of international humanitarian law. The fact of the matter is that only yesterday, or the day before yesterday, the IDF has decided to launch criminal investigations for the first time since the Gaza war. And that is because the way the Israeli army treats allegations is just like my colleague did, as anti-Israeli. Instead of inspecting and checking and trying to figure out what went wrong, if anything went wrong, instead of all this, the IDF is closing. The government of Israel is not enabling any external investigation, and so the allegations are left without a proper investigation. That is not what a country and an army who wishes to be moral, who wishes to work according to the lines of the law, is doing. And I'm sorry that my colleague that called me an anti-Israeli is going along these lines of corrupting the Israeli army and not trying to fix what should be fixed.
All right, I want to take this to London now. Jeremy Corbyn, the allegation that was made, I guess also directed against you in a sense as a human rights activist, that there is some sort of anti-Israeli agenda driving suggestions coming from international human rights activists that war crimes took place in Gaza.
Well, I think we need to look at what actually happened in Gaza and the tragedy that went on during January, when a very large number of civilians were killed, including children. Apparently phosphorus bombs were used. We now have testimonies published in Israeli newspapers and other places which seem to indicate that there was a policy of killing with impunity of Palestinian civilians, and that has led to this call by a group of very eminent international human rights people led by Mary Robinson and Richard Goldstone, calling for an international investigation. And frankly, I think that is the only sensible way forward. It is not credible for the Israeli army to investigate its own crimes in this case, and I think there has to be an international investigation. And at some stage, if the evidence is there, then the case will end up, I hope, at the International Criminal Court, because we cannot have an army of any sort anywhere killing civilians with impunity. It's illegal within the Geneva Conventions, and it ought to be illegal within national law as well.
All right, we'll talk more in a bit, Mr. Corbyn, about an international investigation. If I could go back once again to Mr. Amidror, and the point that you were making is that there's no evidence of any violations. Let's talk a little bit about the dominant military culture. Is there anything wrong with that? According to reports we've heard, military booklets have been published quoting ultra-nationalist Israeli rabbis who believe that showing mercy to a cruel enemy is, quote, terribly immoral. Is the military perhaps creating an environment in which war crimes perhaps might be somehow softened in the eyes of soldiers?
The answer is clear no. I remember myself dealing with the people of The Guardian about the alleged massacre in Jenin when we, in defensive shield operation, and I said there was no any massacre. And after that, even the United Nations declared there was no any massacre. But The Guardian and other people in London still saying, oh, it was more, even worse than massacre. And it is the same about Gaza. At the end of the day, I'm sure, knowing very well the military forces of the State of Israel, that no allegation will be filed, because I know the people. And if there is one, we will send him to jail with no any question. And remember, you say that no army in the world is not letting international interrogation into its action. What happened with the Americans in Iraq? What happened with the Brits in Afghanistan? What's happened with NATO in Afghanistan? Do you let people from international organization to go to Afghanistan to investigate what happened with NATO? So everything here is pure anti-Israeli actions by people who are anti-Israel. Whatever will be done by the State of Israel. And at the end of the day, instead of going to Hamas and ask Hamas people, why did you take civilians to be human shield for your own actions, you are coming to Israelis who defend themselves. And after 8 years of launching rockets into Israel, try to defend themselves, you say the Israelis are not fair. And
right.
If the story of these soldiers, which up till now are only rumors, no one see anyone, no one took part in any action against civilians, if that will be found as a real story, we will send these people to jail.
Right,
as far as I know, up till
take a break now. It is time
one soldier
for a short break.
when
we come back,
I was in the business.
OK, when we come back, we'll ask, could the international community bring Israel to trial over these war crimes allegations? Stay with Inside Story.